So here it is, episode 11 of Schwarzesmarken. Only one episode left, so let's not waste time and get into this episode of our analysis videos. 現在、ハーフェル川近郊、オラニエンブルクに反乱軍の集結を確認。Just a quick note on Oranienburg, that's just a bit more southern to Neuruppin, and it shows that they are advancing to Berlin.
東ベルリン、カウルスドルフ収容所。
So both I and Saint Senate aren't really sure about this prison in Kaulsdorf. We are not aware of one. It could have existed, but to our knowledge it didn't.
St Ursula 作戦に勝利を。
So Operation St Ursula starts rolling out. Is it historical? Well, obviously not. But are there any parallels or similarities we can draw to real history? Well, there is a legend of St Ursula who made a pilgrimage to Europe only to be killed by the Huns during the siege of Cologne. And she's thought to be a Christianized version of the Norse goddess Freya, the goddess of love. And Freya in Norse mythology is the second highest goddess, right after Frigg, who is the wife of Odin. And in a way, this is cool because Katja can be considered to be the big number 2 among the female characters as well. For example, to Theodor, she's obviously the number 2 because to him his number 1 was Lise. And within Schwarzesmarken, she's also number 2 because obviously Irisdina is number 1. There was an Operation Ursula, not an Operation Saint Ursula, but that was only a submarine-related operation that the Third Reich conducted during the Spanish Civil War. So again, we have no real connection to proper history over here.
成長した若者がハンスだと故郷の誰もが気づきません。ですが、お母さんだけはこう呼んだのでした。おかえり、ハンスと。
With the ongoing battle, we see a civilian scene of a mother reading Hänschenklein to her child. Now, this is a rather popular metaphor for German history in the 20th century. Hänschen is an endearing form of the name Hans, which, as you might know, is the stereotypical name for Germans, and for a time it also was the most common name for German men. Anyway, the story of Hänschenklein is simply a little boy named Hans. He goes out into the whole wide world all by himself, facing all the dangers awaiting him, and his mother grieves over not having him at her side anymore. But when he returns, he's a grown man. It's a coming-of-age story, and he has changed a lot, and people don't really recognize him anymore. And in a way, you could say that this is also true for Theodor, who had to face all these difficult situations, both on the battlefield and also with his family when it comes to Lise and all that. And he really matures, as we have seen in the recent episodes. Hänschenklein is also often used for the world wars, as you basically have Hans as the typical German, or who metaphorically stands for the German people, who goes out into the whole wide world facing it all by himself, and at the end of that journey, or of that battle in that case, he is a rather changed man. So yeah, that's a really nice thing to include here.
There are two scenes once again showing the values of East Germany, thinking that, oh, this is a Russian mech, it's supposed to be better, but of course, no matter how good the mech is, if you suck or the opponent is more skillful, that helps winning. A very East German thing, I say. Also, there is this thing with Gretel at the end where she's getting shot and says, aren't these things supposed to be bulletproof? That's a problem with East German equipment. As we said, this is often the case, getting the seconds from the Russians. So these are nice touches, as it's quite real. You might have been wondering in the earlier episodes, what the thing is with Joachim and touching Kirke's ass, and sexual harassment is still not liked in Germany. But I think in context-wise, in West Germany, this is quite possible, as the idea of equality at that time wasn't really that advanced yet, and I think this might have happened. In fact, before West Germans are trying to kill me with, that's not true. Even today, there are still statistics about how it's quite a problem that female cadets, soldiers, etc. are still getting harassed by their male companions. And once again, remember, in East Germany, this is not a thing, at least not in the public, because one good thing about the socialism is it doesn't matter if you're male or woman, you're the same basically, and that's why, at least in public, this was looked down upon. With the Stasi everywhere, this is also really unlikely. Just that you know, because of course everyone was kind of scared to be spied on, and even in small cities it still existed, and getting caught with something like this isn't really good for your reputation.
下水道の下にこんな水路が16世紀のものらしい。
During that little scene in the sewers, it is mentioned that those tunnels are supposedly dating back to the 16th century. Well, that can't quite be true, because the official Berlin sewers were only started being constructed in 1873. So yeah, I can only imagine that there might have been medieval tunnels who were included and repurposed for those sewers. But you know, Berlin does not have an extensive catacomb network like Paris, for example, because, as you know, unlike Gallia, Germania was never really conquered by the Romans, and in fact the Romans were defeated by the Germans. So, yeah, those tunnels, can't quite imagine that they are that old, and if they were something else but sewers beforehand, because, as I said, the real Berlin sewers are much younger than depicted over here.
同志少佐、送水閣下がお呼びです。
わかった。こちら。
Again, we get a nice reference on architecture. The Stasi HQ we see in Berlin is actually the real historical building where they were located at the Normannenstraße. Yeah, we only see it for a few seconds, but it seems to be exactly the same building. Really nice research they did here, and nice recreation of it.
戦勝おめでとうございます。送水閣下。
Erich Schmidt's office kinda left a sour taste in my mouth. I think it's about the technology, because apart from the mechs, we have not seen any kind of technology being much further advanced than it was IRL in this Schwarzesmarken universe. So when I look at his desktop PC, I think, okay, the PC itself, it's a bit small, but I could go with that it was a really special and advanced one for him as the big chief of East Germany now. But his monitor seems like a semi-flat screen. I mean, I remember having a fat-ass CRT monitor way into the early 2000s, and really, in the 80s, such a flat screen, I can't quite imagine that. So the Stasi archives are apparently located inside a flak tower inside the Volkspark Friedrichshain in Berlin. Now, the real Stasi archives were not located there, but this scene really has a lot of stuff for me to cover, so bear with me. First off, the term. Obviously, a lot of people know the term flak, but I think most people don't really know what it stands for. It's a German acronym for Fliegerabwehrkanone. Means as much as aircraft defense cannon. So these towers, they were built in the Third Reich in many major German cities, and obviously they were for air defense as the air raids intensified by the Allies. So what's interesting about them is that a lot of them are still there today. You can still find them in many German cities, and also the Austrian ones, of course. And why is that? Well, especially the ones in Berlin, they were built as part of a Germania project, where Hitler wanted to build this world capital that would also be like a fortress city that would be bomb-proof. So these towers, they were built so sturdy that the Allies simply failed to demolish them after World War II. No matter how much explosives they pumped into it, they just couldn't blow them up, not for lack of trying. It is interesting though, because the Flak Tower in Berlin, Friedrichshain, that pair is not there anymore. The Soviets actually managed to blow those up, at least partly, and then they used a lot of the rubble and created artificial little hills there, and now it's all overgrown and you only see really parts of the old structure coming out beneath grass-covered hills and all of that. Anyway, the tower itself also had a very different design. The design they used here in the show reminds me more of a Flak Tower that is still there in Vienna nowadays. Flak Tower, overall, it's not wrong to depict it like that. It's just that this one does not stand anymore and it didn't look like that at all. But there were models that looked like this, so yeah, alternate universe once again. Still, really nice touch they put into this.
ソ連から核兵器を譲り受ける。核さえあれば無駄に兵士を殺さずに済む。
As the conversation between Beatrix and Schmidt turns to nukes, you might have been wondering whether or not East Germany had access to such weaponry. Well, yes and no. As a partner of the Warsaw Pact, East Germany had access, or at least theoretical access, to the Soviet nukes that were stationed in the country. Now, in case of the Cold War turning hot, the Soviets would have turned over the nukes stationed there to the East German military, and then the East German military would have been free to use these nukes. Now, this was always kept in secret from the population and denied by even the highest politicians. Even the East German leader Erich Honecker back then, when he talked of nukes, he would have called them Teufelszeug, devil's stuff. Then again, the propaganda, of course, was at work there, and it was only to appease the very anti-nuke stance that the German people had after World War II. But overall, propaganda was very creative here, and for example, children in school would have learned that the US nukes that were stationed in West Germany, those were war nukes. However, the nukes that were stationed in East Germany by the Soviets, those were peace nukes, because they were only for deterrence. Of course, with the concept of nuclear deterrence, just play Peace Walker to get the whole image on that matter. But yeah, there's no good or evil in that, in my opinion.
KGB 第一総局グレゴリー・アンドロポフ特務少尉
So Erich Schmidt's true identity is being revealed. He's Gregory Andropov. Now with that photo we see, I couldn't really make out if that uniform was historically accurate or not, but I don't really care about that. What was much more interesting to me was another factor. Remember how we have shown you how Erich Schmidt is simply a counterpart to Erich Mielke in this universe with those photos and his overall design and all that stuff? Well, it is very interesting that his allegedly real name is Andropov. Because from 1967 to 1982, the chairman of the KGB was called Yuri Andropov. So it is really cool that this character apparently is based on two historical figures, but only shares parts of their name. And the really nice thing is where it comes together. He shares the first name with the chief of the Stasi, Erich, and he shares his last name with the chief of the KGB, or the chairman of the KGB, Andropov. This is really cool in my opinion.
So once again, this was quite a long episode with many things to talk about. I still hope you enjoyed it as usual, and subscribe, like, and everything else to the last two episodes. So if you don't care, you wouldn't watch at this point anymore anyway. So I'm really grateful to all of you who are still watching, and see you next week. And remember, I can say it, I'm German.